Okay, now we are officially, it's 3 o'clock. I will call the meeting to order. We have established a quorum. I don't think we have any guest introductions. We had 2 consent items, the approval of the agenda and approval of the minutes for the previous meeting. So do I have a motion to approve the agenda and the minutes?
So moved.
So moved. Welling Clark, El Paso County.
So I heard Welling and then I heard someone else.
Chris
Sorry.
Crockett with Kono, I second.
Okay, thank you very much.
Sorry,
And all those in favor, say aye, raise your hand.
Aye.
Well, if we can't
Aye.
see you, then yell out aye.
Aye.
Can't see your hand. I think the motion carried. So do we have public comments presentations? I don't think we have any, do we, Danelle?
There were no comments received.
Okay, so here's why we're here, the action items. So action item 4A. So is Ann Werner here?
I don't see her in the meeting, so I can go ahead and introduce that item.
Okay,
And I believe there are a couple of folks on the line who can speak to it because this is not in my wheelhouse. However, there is a Cherokee Metro District Sand Creek Facility lift station replacement.
I think someone needs to go on mute.
Are you asking Cherokee folks to introduce ourselves?
In one moment, yes, absolutely. That would be wonderful. So in December, the folks at Cherokee Metro District presented this item to the Water Quality Management Committee regarding the site application. The site application is in your packet. And I will absolutely let you folks talk about this because, as I said, it is not in my wheelhouse. If you would walk through it, that would be wonderful.
All right. Well, thank you to the committee for having us. And I'll just jump right into it. So Cherokee Metro District has had a wastewater lift station at this site since 2011. And there have been enough, it was built quickly and cheaply. And there are a number of things we wanted to approve about the station. So at the end of our scoping process last year, we decided that we needed a brand new lift station to replace the current one. The capacity is not changing. The overall site configuration is changing a little bit, but on the whole, it's just gonna be a much better system for us going forward.
So are there any questions from the committee members? Looks like Kevin's ready to answer them.
Hey, Miley, this is Welling Clark of El Paso County. I have no questions. I've gone through the extensive, almost over 150 pages of documentation. And as working out at Schriever for 4 years, I just want to tell the committee that what I do see is a more robust system being put into place. And this is very important because Schriever is designated a Space Force base now. And this project shows the community's commitment to supporting the military, Space Force in this aspect, here in the Colorado Springs area. And I wish to bring that up because of the attempts of, well, let's just say Huntsville to acquire the Space Force headquarters. And when I was at Schriever, many times Huntsville tried to capture capabilities that were at Schriever and relocate them to Huntsville. So from the standpoint of El Paso County as a whole, this is a very important, though it's not a high profile, but it shows commitment for the community support of our military and for Space Force here in El Paso County. Go on mute.
Judith, looks like you have a comment too.
So I do. So I am new to the committee. I skimmed at least the 173-page attachment. I probably didn't read it as closely as Welling. I have two questions. One is that something that would normally be reviewed by the state water engineer? And would it also be reviewed, since I assume that eventually the water ends up in one of the tributaries to Fountain Creek, would it be reviewed by Colorado Springs Utilities?
So I do quickly want to go back to the previous point and say thank you for recognizing our service to Schriever. Schriever contributes about 15% of our water and wastewater, and they're a really critical part of our system, and we're really proud to be able to serve them. And while this site will not directly change the way that Schriever uses our system, one side benefit that we're very excited about that is not something that helps us directly is that currently there's a large, the wastewater holding tank is uncovered. So there's a smell issue if the wind's blowing the right way to Peterson. And this will solve that issue completely so that Peterson, whenever there's a west wind, won't be smelling wastewater for 20,000 people. So again, yeah, we're really, really proud to be able to help out both of those facilities with this project. So to your question about the Division of Water Resources and the state engineer, because this is a wastewater project, it does not fall under their purview. The state engineer only reviews freshwater diversions and water rights. The second question, does Colorado Springs Utilities need to review it? They do not. We're not under any, they're not a review agency, and we're a completely separate utility and organization. This will have to go to PPACG, the Colorado Department of Health and Environment, for review, and that's actually why it's 170 pages. It's that the application that we submitted is mostly built around satisfying their needs. And this wastewater will be flowing to a wastewater treatment facility that's just south of Schriever. And that facility is where the main compliance and water quality hit. And that facility is going through its own upgrade, but that was approved several years ago. This is just kind of a quantity and delivery mechanism. There's no treatment occurring.
Yeah, also just to clarify, we do not discharge to any tributary to Fountain Creek. We discharge into the upper Black Ground Squirrel designated basin, and they're on the review process with CDPHE.
So,
Thank you. Chris Crockett, looks like you have a hand up.
I do. Thank you. I have two questions. The first one really is more of a procedural question, I guess. Does the Pikes Peak Area Council of Governments Water Quality Management Committee have a mechanism for public comments? And if so, were there any as part of this process? And then my second question is, you said that this will not increase capacity. And since there is population growth out in that direction, are there other projects in place to handle that capacity, or do you feel like, are there concerns about needing additional capacity?
So yeah, thank you for those questions. On the first one, the Water Quality Committee reviewed this last week, or maybe the week before, and there were no public comments. And as far as capacity, the existing station is somewhat oversized for our needs, and so the new station will similarly be oversized. But Cherokee is surrounded now by the state of Colorado Springs, so our capacity for growth that would directly flow into this lift station is significantly limited. More construction to the east of the city boundaries would flow by gravity to our wastewater treatment plant, but right now there's no contemplation of that because there's insufficient capacity out there. But this site does not affect development further east.
Thank you. I don't see any other hands up, arms
me.
waving.
Just me, Ed.
Oh, I forgot. I can't see. All right, go ahead, Ed.
I know you covered the tributaries and the water runoff probably non-existent as far as hitting the creek and what have you. I may have overlooked it, but where do we stand on groundwater and precautions and safety pertaining to that?
So are you talking about on the site itself or on our wastewater treatment plant? 15 miles away?
Around the general area where you're treating and where the water will actually, I guess, be disseminated into whatever area.
So that's outside the scope of this application, but I am happy to talk about it from Cherokee's perspective. Our wastewater treatment plant is undergoing upgrades. It meets all parameters specified by the state except for one, which is salt content. And the upgrades that we're undertaking now, and which started in 2019, will address the salt content being infiltrated back into the aquifer.
Okay, because that was my concern since I represent the eastern area of El Paso County. You know, wells and groundwater are a critical issue out there, and that's always a big concern and question.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm happy to talk about that in the context of other projects, because we have some freshwater development projects and the currently underway wastewater treatment plant upgrades. But this project is strictly relating to getting the wastewater out there in the first place.
Okay, okay.
Thank you. Any other comments? Oh,
Madam Chair, just pointing
Go
out
ahead.
that Ann has her hand raised.
Oh, I did. Oh, she's on a different screen. I missed her. Poor Ann. Okay, go ahead.
Can you hear me okay? Is that all right?
Yes.
I can hear you.
Okay, I was just going to agree with Ed. I'm very concerned about long-term effects of the aquifers and things like that out in the plains. And I'm up in Green Mountain Falls, so I do understand the difficulties with population growth and those things that are occurring all over the place, including the mountains. I also had a little question. I was also trying to read all of that, which is fascinating. But the oversized pipes, it sounded to me like there was trouble with them moving things because they were so big. But you think that the population is still going to grow so much that you need that much? Is that what you said? And that's really all I have to say. But
yeah, the pipes are not oversized. The station itself is oversized. And if you want to get into the nitty gritty of it, ideally you'd want wastewater pipes to flow at a certain velocity that is flushing velocity all the time. But in situations where you want to reserve more capacity, you can just do periodic flushing. And that's discussed in the application, where the pumps are significantly oversized to allow us to send more wastewater down the pipe to flush out accumulations in low spots. But the pipe itself is pretty well sized for our current flow. Even if, if we were building this from the ground up for a fixed, for what we know our capacity is today, we might make it a little smaller, but for current needs and our future needs, we feel confident that's the right size.
so could I ask you this too? CSU is putting in a new lift station up in Green Mountain Falls. And so the pumping stations and the lift stations work together. Is that right?
So it's really just it's just like kind of, I don't know, terms of art that generally in the water wastewater industry, wastewater is conveyed through lift stations and water is conveyed through pumping stations. But those are sometimes just used interchangeably, even project to project and region to region. So people can talk about wastewater pumping stations, they can talk about water lift stations. Generally, lift station is wastewater and pumping is water. But both of them serve the same purpose, and that's to move liquid from a lower elevation to a higher elevation.
Well, it's really complicated because I know Green Mountain Falls does not have a sewer system.
Really?
We have some septic tanks and some the old-fashioned kind, So, but we needed more to move the water around to our people. Well, this is very interesting, and I congratulate you. Thank you.
Thanks to you
I
guys.
saw a question in the chat. Where is Cherokee Water District looking for new freshwater sources?
So currently we have sufficient freshwater sources to serve our present boundaries. And most of our infrastructure is concentrated in the Upper Black Squirrel Basin. So any future development is more than likely going to happen out there.
Thank you. I'm scanning. I don't see any more hands. So are we ready for a motion? We need to recommend approval of the Cherokee Metropolitan District Sand Creek Facility lift station replacement. So could I have a motion?
Roy Rosenthal, I'll recommend a motion to approve the report.
Thank you, Roy. And a second?
I'll second Terry Hayes.
Thank you, Terry. No further discussion, I don't think. So all those in favor signify by saying aye or waving your hand, whatever we need to do. We
I,
can't see.
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? I think the motion carries. Thank you all.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. And let me know if you have any follow-up questions. I'll put my email in the chat. But thanks, guys.
Thank you, Kevin. Okay, next on the agenda is PPACG annual safety targets setting 2023, and Danelle is going to do that one.
Yes, and I do have some CDOT support here. So David, if you if I misspeak or if there's questions, please feel free to hop in here.
Okay.
So basically what we have here is an annual safety target, safety performance measures target that is set by CDOT. And PPACG as the MPO is required to either support this target or set our own target on an annual basis. It is staff's recommendation to support the CDOT target, and it is historically what we've done in the past. If we scroll down to the first page of the slideshow, these are the targets set for 2023. And the safety performance management, the targets are part of the overall transportation performance management program, which is defined by the FHWA, the Federal Highways Administration, as a strategic approach that uses system information to make investment and policy decisions to achieve national performance goals. So this specifically, the safety performance measurement supports the Highway Safety Improvement Program. There are 5 safety performance measures: the number of fatalities, the number of fatalities per million vehicle miles traveled. That's that 1.262 right there. The number of serious injuries, the rate of serious injuries, again, by million vehicle miles traveled, and the number of non-motorized fatalities and non-motorized serious injuries. So right here on this slide, there is the targets for 2023 compared with the actuals from the calendar year 2021. And so these are the targets that we are asking our committees and our board to support CDOT in. If you want to scroll to the next couple of slides, David, do you want to talk a little bit about the trends and how you come up with the targets?
Yeah, so as you can see here, I'm David Sika with CDOT headquarters, traffic and safety. By the way, nice to be here. So what you're seeing here is the last 10 years of fatalities for Colorado. And what we do is we apply an exponential smoothing model to determine what the trend line is, although you don't really need that to see the trend here. You see things are increasing, and for 2022, it is even higher. Not even at the end of the year, we're at 727, and we expect that number to be even a little bit higher. So the targets, at least for the fatalities, do account for that. We predicted to be higher for 22 and 23 using that 5-year average between 19 and 23. Even though, like in our prediction model, we had a little bit over 700 for 2022, but we're like way over 700. So I think it's overextending us right now. So I see a question here. It's like 2019 seemed low. Well, you can see from 2017, there's a little bit of a peak, then it started going down to 2018 and 2019. And then suddenly 2020, pandemic year, it just suddenly was a game changer and everything across the board got worse. And that's what we're seeing with that increasing trend. So prior to the pandemic, things were appearing to improve, but the pandemic is looking now like a very serious pivot point for one reason or another. But yeah, so really the targets do factor in, things are increasing.
Marijuana legalized in Colorado.
Oh, excuse me, what was the question?
I think it was someone just wasn't on mute.
Oh, okay.
No question.
No worries. Yeah. So as I was saying, the 5-year averages do account for the increasing trend, and right now at this point in time, before in 2019 we were looking to follow that trend line of continuing downwards, but now it's almost like we're just happy to stop the bleeding, and we're not quite there yet. Go ahead into the next slide, please. For the serious injuries, there's a little bit more variance there, but we are still seeing a little bit of an increase since 2020. Although the 2022 numbers aren't showing here, the numbers are expected to be pretty close to 2021 levels. So those are going to be also elevated as well, along with the fatalities, and pretty much you could probably tie those to the same reason fatalities are increasing. So the trend line here wasn't as definitive because over the 10 years the trend wasn't increasingly upwards. So it's not that sharp of an increase, but it is increasing, and the 5-year averages do reflect more of that even level. But I think if we were to do this again next year, we'd probably set a little bit higher of a target for serious injuries. And next slide. So just summarizes sort of the statewide comparisons we've seen in that 2020 pivot year. And the number of fatalities doesn't look so bad in that year, just because the vehicle miles traveled were comparatively low since the state was shut down for a good portion of the year. But you can see that rate jump really hopped up between 2019 and 2020. And even though the number of fatalities was higher in 2021, the rate wasn't that much worse. However, in 2022, I don't see the vehicle miles traveled increasing that much, and the fatalities are going to be well into the 700s. So we very well may see a rate change, a rate increase for 2021. And looking at the categories below, you can see the splits between urban areas and rural areas. And it's been pretty consistent around that 60-40 split, urban to rural. And we have the on system, the off system split. That on system just means it's on the state highway or an interstate, where off system is a road owned by or maintained by a city or county. And that also is sort of consistent at 60-40 on those state highways in that time frame. But the increases you can see with pedestrians and motorcycles and scooters and the suspected impairment. Whereas bicycle is really the only trend that hasn't increased. And in 2022, it's even lower than 2021. So at least there's that silver lining that bicycle fatalities aren't increasing along with everything else. I know a question comes up a lot about speeding, and that's one thing I do want to get back with my analysts and add to this chart. But yeah, those have also been increasing over this time frame as well. So was that the last slide, or do we have any others?
I believe that's the last slide.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I made some graphs just recently covering some of the Pikes Peak area counties like El Paso and Teller and Park. But there's really not anything too groundbreaking there. El Paso is usually around that 10 to 12% of the state's fatalities. And, the 10-year trend does show an increase, not quite in the same way, but there has been an increase in those 10-year period. It hasn't quite been increasing gradually over the last couple of years. It's been more stable, but at a high level between 2020 and 2022. There was a big hop between 2016 and 2017, and it has sort of stayed there. But the serious injuries for El Paso County has kind of followed those state trends. And the number of fatalities and serious injuries for Park and Teller County are pretty low, so low that you really can't form a discernible pattern out of those. You're talking about 0 to 5 fatalities for Teller County and 3 to 8 fatalities per year per Park County. And it's kind of just bounced around that area. There hasn't been like a definitive increase or anything like that. But yeah, that's really the summary of it. And that, all this information kind of goes into the formation of the safety target setting for 2019 to 2023. So with that, any questions? Oh, does increase in fatalities reflect a population increase for the area? So the population increase is reflected a lot in the VMT numbers you see at the top row. The more people you have reflects in more people on the road traveling. And I know 2020 was a little bit of a blip year, but it does account for that. So the rates really account for the increase in population, but you can really see that hop between 2019 and 2020, and 2022 might be a little bit worse than 2021.
Maylee, I have a comment if I could.
Go ahead, Ann.
Yes. Hi, I'm up in Green Mountain Falls, and I lived in North Carolina for 50 years and was very involved with the Governor's Highway Safety Commission. And this is all wonderful about your projections. I mean, I understand, but I wonder if we could get any information about all these deaths and what was involved. Was it alcohol? Alcohol and marijuana actually combined make it worse. Speeding, texting, all those other things that we need to know about, and then also increase law enforcement. Do you have any idea about what you're going to do? Thank you.
Yeah, those are all very good points, and all of those factors, maybe all of them at the same time in a lot of ways, are significant contributing factors. You also have seatbelt usage. Certainly the vulnerable population is at risk too. People are not seeing pedestrians and motorcycles. If they get into a crash, it's not going to be a good result most of the time, especially if it's with another vehicle. But certainly, the impairment, whether it's drugs or alcohol, it tends to bounce around that 30 or 40%. If you looked at the 10-year trends, it's not quite the same as the overall numbers. I'm not sure why that is, but certainly when you're talking here, close to 40% of the crashes involve some sort of impairment. Yeah, that's a significant portion of the crashes, and that's one area that needs to be addressed. And certainly, with being with the DOT, we support enforcement, but certainly the law enforcement, they're having their own challenges right now, and that's always a part of the struggle as well.
Chris Crockett, you have a question.
I do. Thank you for that information. And I had the same question as Ann about sort of a further breakdown, and then how you disseminate that information to various law enforcement officials who hopefully can act on it, because the suspected impaired is truly an alarming number. But then I'm also wondering about other breakdowns too. For instance, I see red light running in my neighborhood. I live in Colorado Springs. that is kind of rampant, and it's sort of like, you better run that light or the guy behind you is going to rear end you. So I'd be curious to know about what other kinds of accidents are causing these serious injuries and fatalities, and then how is that information being given to the general public so that they can perhaps adjust their behaviors, and also given to law enforcement so their behaviors can be adjusted. And then, just out of idle curiosity, what is an example of a non-motorized fatality that triggers your data?
So in this context, any non-motorized fatality involves either a pedestrian or a bicyclist with another motor vehicle. So that's how it's defined, and that's how we define it as a fatal crash involving a non-motorized unit. Motorcycles, even though they're vulnerable, they don't officially count in the federal definition of vulnerable roadway user, but obviously it's something we keep an eye on since it's a considerable portion of the crashes. And certainly so the cause of crashes usually falls into three major categories. One, there's roadway departures, which you're running off the road, usually in rural areas. The other is intersections, which more often than not take place in urban areas. So like you're saying, someone running a red light or making a left turn in front of another vehicle, or certainly most of your pedestrian crash, since the bicycle crash is going to occur. A lot of them will occur at intersections as well. And then the third category was pedestrians and bicyclists, which again, occur in urban areas, usually along urban arterials and some of the more bigger cities, and a lot of them at intersections, but some of them also at mid-block crossings as well. And really our data analysis, we do some network screening, we distribute, we make our crash data available. Certainly we work with our law enforcement partners. So we mostly work with the Colorado State Patrol, but we're always communicating as we need to, whether it's discussion about the data or intersection safety improvements and stuff, like with Colorado Springs. And we have safety programs like the Highway Safety Improvement Program, which is a grant that can support cities and counties do certain type of improvements at locations which do exhibit a high crash history. And we support them in that way. So hopefully I caught everything there. I might not have, but hopefully that answers some, if not all, of your questions.
Thank you, David. So Judith, you've got a question?
As a mother and a grandmother, I find your what you find acceptable, not acceptable in terms of targets. I really don't. And I'm wondering two things. I see that a lot of places across the country have done very successful programs under the rubric of Vision Zero. I mean, it's successful to the extent of having no fatalities. Now, obviously, that partially the size of the. So I'm just wondering if we have any places in Colorado who've done such a program. And then when my daughter was at Steele Elementary in Colorado Springs, we had a very active Safe Routes to School program. And we got money to get cameras, the parents and the kids took photographs of places where they thought walking and cycling was not particularly safe. With the data, we were able to do some traffic calming and actually get some pedestrian bulbs. What has happened to that program? I tried to look for it, and it looked like the only place in our area that still is getting any money from the state, and that's where the money comes from, is up in Monument. It's not even in Colorado Springs. So if we are truly concerned about fatalities, which I think we should be, why are we not looking to Vision Zero, and why have we lost the Safe Routes to School program?
The Safe Routes to School program is still active. Maybe it's hard to find, and it's gone through some management changes, and another person here at CDOT manages that. But we are connected and it's still active, and certainly there are projects going around statewide, maybe not so much. I can't think of any in Region 2 right now that are active, but certainly across the state there are a few.
There is that one that that was mentioned in Monument, Lewis Palmer School District 38 has a Safe Routes to School program. And those projects, that grant money is applied for by the school districts. And it is awarded through CDOT.
Push them then, thank you.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
why not Vision Zero? Does
Yeah,
CDOT
Colorado is a Vision Zero state, and certainly you're right. Anything less or more than zero is not acceptable. I don't know. It's sort of just a matter of target setting. Sometimes, especially as an engineer, sometimes you take a pragmatic approach, which can be a little bit impersonal at times, and possibly insensitive to that subject matter. But certainly we want to see a downward trend, and really when we're looking at trends going up, I don't know, it may be a little bit, to me at least, seem a little ingenuous to say, oh, we're going to be at zero in 10 years or something like that. I think we have a long way to go. We want to head that direction, certainly, and no one's saying that that's not the right thing to do, but certainly we have a lot to figure out to head there. And there are various cities and counties also committed to that as well. Denver has a Vision Zero group within their city, and you see several of those types of groups across the state at the local agency level, along with at the state. We have the strategic planning group, which is, certainly have a colleague who runs that to try to coordinate activities, not just with the engineering, but the behavioral. So certainly, yeah, it's, I totally agree. It's hard to say that, 500 fatalities is acceptable, or 600. It doesn't really sound right, but I don't know. It's sometimes this exercises in target setting makes you say weird stuff like that. It's hard to explain.
if you put your email in the chat, I will send you an article which I haven't been able to quickly find again. But the article was talking about the fact that during COVID, the vehicle miles traveled in our state has decreased substantially, while the fatalities has increased. That seems to me to be a problem. Vehicle miles traveled lessened and fatalities increased.
Yeah, that's alarming, and you can see that reflection in the rate where it jumped up from 1.09 to 1.2a. You really never see that leap of 20% or whatever that percentage increase is. It's pretty significant. And that just goes to show that 2020 was a game changer. And I think we're still trying to figure out what went on, or, how the thinking is different among our drivers from just that year and event. And I think we're having a tough time figuring that out, or trying to address it in an impactful manner.
Thank you. Paul, did you have anything else, Judith, before we move on to Paul?
No, thank you.
Go ahead, Paul. You had a question?
I do. I know.
Whoops.
Can you hear me?
You're really cutting out.
Can you guys hear me?
I can hear you a little bit. I did see your question that you posted in the chat. Have we noticed more accidents because of the flashing yellow left turns? What about that one, David?
That's an interesting question. Because the flashing yellow left turns, for left turn protection, which is a huge contributor to intersection related fatalities across the state. And certainly if you put up a flashing yellow arrow and just have it operating, it's not going to really improve the safety at all. I don't think it decreases the safety. But unless you configure the signal to do a fully protected left turn, when you have that red arrow and it's not letting you judge the gaps between oncoming traffic, that's where you have the advantage of increasing safety. But the flashing yellow arrow itself, in my opinion, it doesn't really do very much on its own, even though there have been studies that show it is a net improvement in safety and reducing crashes at an intersection. But I struggle with that one. If there's a time of day full protection component to it, I think it's great. But by itself, I'm not really entirely sold on it.
Paul, did you have another question?
Hopefully you can hear me now.
Yes, much better.
Well, I only asked that question because my wife was in an almost deadly accident. It was a flashing yellow, and I've seen a lot of accidents. I've seen friends, but is there a reason why we just can't make them red and green? Flow, or what's the reason behind even having a
It has been established in the 2009 Manual of Uniform Traffic Control Devices, which has the state of Colorado has, or at least CDOT has adopted as a way of how we're supposed to configure our signals and our left turn signals and stuff. So it's something that we're bound to follow since we've adopted that manual. So that's probably why you're seeing more of those come up instead of the older style with I guess you could call it the doghouse configuration with the green arrow and such. But operationally, it's not supposed to be any different. It might throw people off, but operationally, it's supposed to be the same as what you've seen before. But there's a variety of ways you configure it. I mean, you can configure it to do nothing, or you configure it to have that red arrow, which protects the driver from making the decision from turning left when the opposing traffic is busy. So it's one of those questions, unfortunately, where I have to say it depends.
Anything else, Paul, before we move on to Ann?
No, that's.
Thank you. Okay, Ann, you had another question?
Well, I do. I have another comment, and I was just going to say that I know I was so involved in traffic safety back east for so long, and there's always a conflict between moving traffic and safety. You know, people don't like to have to slow down and wait. It looks like nobody's coming. Those kind of things. The other thing I wanted to ask you, I do recall that it was proven that the striping on the pavements, especially in rural areas, where you have it on the side of the road and you know that's the edge of the road, and other things like that, are very, very important for safety and potholes. Those two are just road maintenance that, and we're kind of losing our striping up here in the mountains, and I just wondered why. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, certainly our maintenance folks are better prepared to address that question, but from what I do know, striping is expensive, and they try to get as much as they can when they go out and lay down some lines on roadways. And certainly in the more mountainous areas, the striping gets beat up and just doesn't last long. The service life is pretty poor up there, and certainly a lot of it's a resource issue, but some of it's a standard too. Not all rural roads have striping on the shoulders and such, and certainly CDOT's trying to commit to laying down more striping in those areas and committing more funding to that. And there are studies that show, especially in rural areas, that a shoulder line, a white line on the right side of the road, does help improve safety and maybe keep a few people from running off the road in certain cases. But yeah, that's certainly something we struggle with here at CDOT, with resource allocation and scheduling how often a road gets repainted.
Well, and I know it's hard to do. For instance, Highway 24, you pass, there's so much traffic there, and you have to close one side of the road to be able to do anything. And then people get upset and have rear end collisions and that kind of thing. So I'm not being critical, really. I know it's a very difficult problem. Thank you.
Thank you.
So Paul, did you have another question or your hand's still up there for general principles?
No, I'm good. I'm trying to figure out how to get rid of it, the hand away, make it go away.
I understand. Yeah, it's gone. Okay. Thank you,
you.
Paul. Any other questions before we have a motion to basically what we're really trying to do today is just to approve the recommended targets for next year.
Yes,
I
ma'am.
have a
Wellington,
quick-
El Paso County. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, Judith, you had a question?
I have a quick question since we have this expert on statistics. I wondered if you've calculated the cost differential for those painted shoulder lines. I mean, it would be interesting as a voter and taxpayer to know, how much it would cost for those people in rural areas to increase the safety. Do you do those kind of calculations so that it's when you're saying yes, it's going to cost more money, that you can actually calculate how much more money?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I don't have the specifics. It's not as much as my expertise as some other areas, but it's one of those things where, just anecdotally, it is surprising how much it costs to stripe the whole state. I mean, you're talking tens of millions of dollars per year.
Thanks.
Oh, thank you, David. Welling, I think you were starting to give a motion.
Yeah. Well, no, I was actually going to make a comment and some observations because one of my degrees is applied statistics. Okay, I heard statistics mentioned. Yes, my lips are moving. I'm lying. Okay, I'm sorry. No, but overall, what I wanted to say is the safety performance targets for 2023 lower what we're experiencing right now. And CDOT, please correct me if I'm wrong, but this is what we use as metrics to determine how we allocate funds for our infrastructure, try to improve the safety to the public. That is a question. I think the answer is yes, but is that correct?
There are certainly federal funding implications to not meeting the targets, and but they aren't too serious. Basically, if we don't meet the targets, and we haven't in the last couple of years, it's just saying it's like all the federal allocation for safety funding stays as safety funding. The state sometimes has options to flex out half of the safety funding into other areas like operations or what have you. This just keeps the safety money as safety money for safety improvement projects. So that's really the implication there.
Okay, but the goal is to actually improve where we're at. We have less fatalities, less accidents, less injuries, and we have a safer community.
Yes.
Okay, good. I was looking at the fatality trends, 2019, 2020, 2021, and then I was looking at serious injuries. Mm-hmm. And this is a causation and a correlation question where I saw serious injuries in 2020 seriously drop. And that's where people were told to stay off the street, stay at home, and all of that. And that's on slide number 3. Slide number 2, actually the fatalities went up. And so I was looking at that, and then I was looking at the slide 4, the comparison of 2019 to 2021. And I'm almost wondering, can you in the future break out fatalities and the accidents where it implies we have multiple populations of drivers, where the serious injuries is where someone made a bad decision, for lack of a better term, and there was an accident. But, and this I don't know, but the question I would have, I'd propose to CDOT to look into to see if we could come up with something next year, is that with the increased fatalities, does that mean the drivers that are driving recklessly enough to be impaired by drugs, alcohol, or whatever, don't pay attention to the laws? And that's why we have a increase of 622 to 597 fatalities between from 2020 back to 2019. Yet we had a lot fewer accidents. And I think some people were mentioning that from that standpoint. And when I go down farther, looking at slide 4, I see we have a 45% increase of suspected impairment, either alcohol or drugs, and we get that broken out. The other thing is right above it, it says motorcycles and scooters. Where do those occur? I am seeing a lot more powered vehicles, for lack of a better term, on residential streets, zipping along, not stopping at stop signs and things like that. I wonder if that was part of the cause too. Because if I'm on a little powered scooter and I get hit by a car, I can tell you who I think is going to win and who's going to lose.
Right.
But those are some comments I would like to see, that, if you wouldn't mind, to get where are those fatalities coming in? Where are those serious injuries coming in? And what is the causation of that? Because that's kind of what I heard from a lot of the citizens asking, where we have less travel, we have more fatalities, we have less crashes. We need to break it out, I think, a little bit better from a causation standpoint. Just a comment. I am in favor of any safety guidance that improves or gives you goals to improve the safety of the citizens. So with that, Madam Chair, I will be quiet.
Okay.
That was a lot, David, but give it a shot.
Yeah, I'll try to remember all the points there. But yeah, correct. The motorcycles and scooters, the majority of those fatalities are occurring in more urban or suburban areas and not rural areas. There's plenty in rural areas for sure. But yeah, a lot of those are a reflection of like the example of at an intersection, there's, someone runs a red light or misjudges a gap while turning left, and motorcycle versus another vehicle, the motorcycles is always going to lose big time. So the stuff about the serious injuries and the fatalities, yeah, and you see also on the sheet the number of reported crashes from 2019 to 2020 dipped pretty severely and it stayed low in 2021. But that didn't mean things got safer. That's more of a function of reporting. And I think a lot of that is the impact to the law enforcement agencies and their ability to respond to lower severity crashes, for instance. I think nowadays it's just like a lot of local agencies or local police departments are on 24-hour accident alert, where if no one gets hurt, you just ask the participants in the crash to exchange insurance and move along. Whatever. So the reports that we receive, and that number you see in the total reported crashes, is what we receive from law enforcement agencies reporting on crashes. And if they don't report to a crash, we never see that crash number. So it's not a reflection of, things got better. It's just it's more of a function of how things are reported in the last couple of years, as opposed to 2019 and the years before, where the number of crashes reported was consistently around 120,000 per year. The serious injuries for 2020, it's hard to say. I want to say in a lot of ways that 2020 might be an outlier, because we're not seeing a huge difference between 2019 and 2021 and now 2022, which is probably going to be over 3,400 crashes when it's all said and done. Again, could be a function of the reporting as well. The lesser severity of the crash, the more inaccurate the data is. So the fatalities are very accurate. As you go down the scale, there's more error involved in the number of crashes being reported and displayed here. But for the most part, when we show these graphs, we really want to concentrate on the fatalities and serious injuries, because that's going to be the more accurate statistics there. But yeah, the drop in 2020, yeah, it's hard to say, because there's really not a huge distinguishment between, what type of crash is a serious injury crash and what type of crash is a fatality crash. It really just comes down to that the person end up dying or, being severely hurt for, as a result of the crash.
All right, thank you. Any more comments? Are we ready for a motion? Let's see,
Madam
what do
Chair,
we?
I just wanted, Judith Rice Jones did have a question in the chat.
Oh, okay.
It's
Any
a quick
reason?
question.
Oh yeah, go ahead. You want to verbalize it, Judith? Go ahead.
Just for David, I'm just see the trucks getting bigger and bigger and not always following speed limits. So I noticed that's not a discrete item that you've separated out on your charts.
Sure.
Is there any reason why?
I guess lack of room. We try to focus on the stuff that we think are of interest, but certainly there's all sorts of categories, and sometimes you can't. Certainly we have those commercial vehicles, and we do some calculations and summarizations of that. Buses, that's probably not a very large sample size, but I do think we're seeing with the larger vehicles that things aren't improving as well. The safety is getting worse on and that front as well. But the reason it's not on the table is just there's 1,000 things you could throw. The data elements are numerous, and we're just kind of trying to show stuff that we think we could cover in a short amount of time, and we think would be of interest to the audience that we're talking to.
Thanks.
Any other questions? I don't see any more chats. I forgot to check the chat before. Okay. How about the motion to recommend approval of the new safety targets for next year?
Chris
I
Cross.
moved-
Rosenthal, I'll move that we recommend the safety targets for next year, staying with the state targets.
Okay, so that was Roy. And then Ann, did you want to second that?
Sure, I'll do that.
Thanks. Okay, been moved and seconded. If there's no further discussion, all those in favor signify by saying aye or raising your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
And more importantly, those that are opposed signify. I don't hear anything. So the motion carries. Thank you so much, David, for answering all the questions.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Sorry, I feel like I'm just the bearer of bad news these days. Hopefully, it'll get better if we do this again.
Yeah, when your job is to report fatalities, it's not always. It's never good news.
It's not great these days. I'm hoping for better days.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Okay.
David.
Last item on the agenda, action item 4C, fiscal year 23-27 transportation improvements. Danelle.
Yes. So we released a notice of funding availability in August for 3 different funding sources. We also had an additional funding source become available due to some funding swaps. So those funding sources are limited to certain types of projects depending on the funding source, which I can certainly go into a little bit if you'd like. But they are surface transportation block grant funding, which is also known as STP Metro. That's our most flexible federal funding source. The Transportation Alternatives Program, TAP funding, the Carbon Reduction Program funds. This is a new funding source created by the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. And then also the Multimodal Transportation and Mitigations Options Fund funding. And that's the funding that there was a funding swap for a project. And so we had a bit of funding available there as well. So if we scroll down to the first, there we go. Yes. The first table there. This is a table that details all of the projects that applied for funding, all of the project sponsors that applied for funding, and it's broken out by funding source. The items in gray are those that were not selected by the TAC for funding at this point. We did have more requests for funding in almost every category, or actually in every category. So we did have to have some projects either not receive funding or not receive the full amount of funding at this time. And if you scroll down 2 pages after that, it's page 171 in your packet. This is the table that details the funding recommendations. This is what was given to us as the recommendations by our TAC during our selection workshop, and then was also approved by the TAC 2 weeks ago at that regular meeting. And I can walk a little bit through these specific projects. So there are 3 projects that were selected for multimodal transportation and mitigation options fund funding. Those are a Palmer Lake project. This is a design project for some bicycle pedestrian and safety improvements on Colorado 105 through that area of Palmer Lake, where there is the recreation, the eastern side, and businesses on the western side. There is a Lewis Palmer School District Sidewalk and Trails project. That is a project that is an existing project in our transportation improvement program. There were some changes to that project required by El Paso County that basically made Lewis Palmer School District not have enough funding to fully complete it. Under this allocation, they would actually receive both MMOF funding and some transportation alternatives funding. And that would allow Lewis Palmer School District to fully complete that project. And that project it is also the project that Ms. Rice Jones was talking about earlier, that also has some Safe Routes to School funding as well. And then the final project receiving MMOF funding is a Mountain Metro Transit project for a replacement bus. And in this case, they would be looking at purchasing a hybrid bus. For transportation alternatives, and I should mention, there is a column on here that says cost overrun. So when we put out this notice of funding availability, the TAC gave us as staff the guidance that it was preferred that existing projects that didn't have enough funding to be fully implemented would be a priority over new projects. So that's what that column is indicating. If it's a existing project that requires additional funding, or if it's a new project. So there's 5 projects here. One of them is that Lewis Palmer School District Sidewalk and Trail project that I talked about. There's a Ute Pass Trail project. There's a Creek Walk Trail Phase 3 project in Manitou Springs. This project is a project that went out to bid, and bids came in higher than anticipated, so they are not able to complete that project unless they get this additional funding. And then there is also the Colorado Springs 31st Street and Fontanero Bridge reconstruction project. And finally, there is one new project that was recommended to receive TAP funding. This is a pedestrian project that would install some sidewalks along Browning Avenue, Lake Street, and Pine Ridge Avenue in Woodland Park. For the SDP Metro funding, that's the funding in blue down at the bottom there. There's 3 projects. There's a fountain project that's actually been in our long range plan and in our tip for quite a long time. It is improvements on Indiana Avenue in Fountain, where the railroad crossing is. There are 2 El Paso County projects. One is a Walker Road, State Highway 104 improvement project, and then also a bridge replacement on Arnold Avenue. And then finally, the carbon reduction program funds. There are 3 projects there that are recommended for funding. The top 2 projects are Mountain Metro Transit projects, and those are both vehicle purchase projects. The top one is specifically for battery electric buses for Route 3 expansion. And the second one is for just general vehicle purchase. And then the final project is a wetland bank project on an El Paso County wetland bank project along Acres Drive. And I have applications are available for all of those projects. If you have any specific questions about them, if you have any questions about, why there's cost overruns, those kinds of things, I can certainly pull that information up and we can talk about that. But these projects were selected, as I said, by the TAC, and we are looking to advance them to the board.
Thank you, Danelle. So Chris, you have a question?
I do. Thank you, Danelle. I had a question about the Palmer Lake Main Street project. On page 170, I think the double asterisk that talks about something is not a qualified entity. And I was just wondering if that decision has been made yet, that it is a qualified entity. And if it is not, it turns out not to be a qualified entity, where will those funds go?
So you are correct. There is on page 170, there is a note that the FHWA does not believe there's an organization is a qualified entity. That actually applies to the Creek Walk Marketplace Business Improvement District. They were applying for some funding for streetscape improvements along South Nevada Avenue. And we did have a discussion with the Creek Walk Marketplace Business Improvement District about some alternative sources of funding that they could potentially go after that would not necessarily be federal funding. I do not believe that FHWA's legal team has made that the final determination on their eligibility yet, but they were not selected for funding at this time, primarily because it was a new project and the other projects that were eligible for TAP funding are existing projects that are still in need of funding.
Okay, I appreciate that. I just got confused by the 2 asterisks versus 1 asterisk.
Yes.
Thanks.
Yes.
Sorry about that. Thank you.
Absolutely. I should point out, so the town of Palmer Lake on their Main Streets design project, the overall funding amount for that project is $150,000. Generally, MMOF funding requires a 50% match in our urbanized area. The town has requested a waiver of that match amount, just due to their budget concerns and their constraints for the town. We did work with the town a little bit to potentially look at other funding sources that they might be eligible for. But there are some limitations for design projects. Our TAC felt that the project was worth putting forward and requesting the waiver of the match funding. So what will happen is if our board approves that, it will go to the Transportation Commission, and generally the Transportation Commission has been agreeing and approving those waivers when an MPO or a TPR has approved it.
Roy, you have a question.
Yeah, to be clear, if this is approved, will all of these projects get these funds that are stated
Yes.
here?
Yes,
So this is the last step for them to get the funds?
correct, yes.
Okay, thank you.
I don't see any other questions. So I guess we're ready for the motion to basically recommend this goes to the Board of Directors for approval.
Yes.
Maylee, this is Ann.
Yes, Ann.
I had one question.
Sure.
Could Danielle, I hate to put you on the spot, but the funds for the wetlands,
Mhm.
that thing, could you explain what that is?
I can. Let me open the El Paso County's words so that I don't mess it up, because I will. So the Acres Wetland, the Wetland Bank project was actually originally applied for funding in 2015. And at the point of design, the design fee exceeded the amount that they were anticipating. So they were only left with about $290,000 left for construction. They've been attempting to get additional funding for this for several years now. And the project is still in the design phase. The preliminary design is almost complete. The consultant will be beginning the final design very soon. And all of the design work, including permitted and clearances, is scheduled to be completed in July. And at that time, El Paso County will be ready to advertise that for construction. The actual project itself, I'm just trying to open the proper wording of that, because I am not an expert in all things.
That's just kind of hard. I'm just concerned about this wetland bank. It's sort of like you're going to have to disturb something, so you make a contribution to somewhere else so they won't destroy something else. Is that right?
So what they're doing with the wetland bank is it's a design and construction project for mitigation for inclusion in the El Paso County Wetland Umbrella Mitigation Bank. And it's about 20 acres, this project specifically. And I can certainly get additional information on the parcel of land from El Paso County, if that would be helpful for you.
I'd love to know more about that. It's a new thing that they're doing, and I just don't understand how that works.
I'd be curious just to know if it's adjacent to a waterway or not. Being a member of the Fountain Creek Water District, that always raises an issue about wetlands. And I'm sorry, I did not look up Acres Drive when I was looking at the pages, so no idea where it is.
I have that concern also. So, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any more questions before we go to the motion? Don't think so. All right. How about a motion?
Terry Hayes, I recommend approval of fiscal year 23 to 27 TIP amendment number 5 to the Board of Directors.
Good job. Thank you, Terry. Second?
Chris Crockett, second.
Thank you, Chris. No further discussion, then all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye or raising your hand.
Aye.
All those opposed? The motion carries. And I think that's it for action items today. Thank you all for doing that. We have no information items, no member entity announcement. We have a meeting schedule. for next year.
It looks like we have a couple of hands raised.
Oh, I see a hand. Chris, you had a question.
Sorry, not a question, but I had a member entity announcement, and I didn't realize I was supposed to let you know exactly what it is to be on the agenda.
Okay, well, that's okay. It's allowed. Go ahead.
Okay, and should that be now or after?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. I just wanted to let the PPACG know that on the 13th of December, I was asked to report to the Plan COS Neighborhood Network 3A, which is now calling itself the Greater West Side Community Network, about what PPACG does and how the work that they're doing as part of the Plan COS comprehensive plan for Colorado Springs kind of dovetails or abuts the work that PPACG does. And I wanted to tell, and so I'm hoping that will generate more interest in certainly being on the PPACG and possibly more interest in at least getting information and making public comments when they're asked for. This is a very great group of 14 board members who are very connected to the West Side neighborhoods. And they, the work that they have recently done, they just completed coming up in partnership with the City of Colorado Springs Planning Department, their what they call their big ideas, the 7 big ideas, and they're like value statements or themes for the work that will be done as part of this comprehensive plan. And interestingly, one of the top ones is to provide better and safer transportation options. So PPACG and the transportation work that is done in this committee and then later on the board is very important to them. So I am very glad to sit on this committee and learn these things so I can take them back to this neighborhood network. And I also wanted to let you all know that they are starting to recruit neighborhood leaders for the 5A neighborhood. And that's basically like Old North End to Nob Hill. So if you know people who would like to participate in that, please feel free to ask them to call me or send me an email, and I'm very happy to walk them through it. But the work that's being done on this comprehensive plan is exciting work. And I just wanted to make that announcement.
Oh, good. Thank you, Chris. Yeah, I kind of was speeding over that on the agenda, but any more member entity announcements? You're allowed to talk even if it wasn't on the agenda. Okay. Danelle, do you have anything else before we adjourn?
I do not. Thank you for asking.
Okay, well, I'm up for adjourning the meeting if there are no objections. All right, well, I don't think we need a motion. So the meeting is adjourned. See you all next year. Have a happy new year.